if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So you got yourself in this mess for a reason, right? You didn't look ahead. You weren't proactive. You didn't put a plan in place in order to handle this scalability, in my opinion. But at this point, it's too late. So now how do we fix it?
Thank you for joining another edition of PMP Industry Insider Podcast, where we look at what's changing the pest control industry and take you to the front line with those that are driving the changes in the industry so you can grow your business. This is Dan Gordon with PCO Bookkeepers and M&A Specialists. We do accounting and CFO work, as well as exit planning services for the pest and lawn industry. And with me is the man about town, the guy who doesn't know how to drive in snow, Donnie Shelton from Triangle Home Services. Go ahead, Donnie. How are you?
All right. So if you're a longtime listener, you know this is very awkward that Dan is introducing and starting, and now I'm going to be the sponsors. And so let me just tell you, if you're watching the YouTube video, I am just having so much fun right now. It has been awesome watching Dan score. And he is correct. I am the owner of Triangle Home Services, which has Triangle Pest and Triangle Lawn. We're grateful that you're joining us. And before we get into our sponsors, I just want to introduce our topic and our guest today. Today we have Laura Corbin, Team Development Coach from Pest Control Business Coach with us. And we're going to be talking about the topic of growth without grind, building sales and systems that don't burn you out. And before we get into that and talk to Laura, which I'm super excited about, we would like to give our sponsors a little love. First of all, if you are wanting to partner with a company to fuel growth for pests or your lawn company, Comarch helps you scale smarter. Of course, we have the bean counters, meaning that, we do want to get credit if you decide to use Comarch from this show. Go over to comarch.com/podcast, and I don't know, maybe Dan will give you some free stuff as well. We'll see.
That's also, forward slash.
Did I say backslash?
You just said slash.
Just slash. Thank you for that correction there, Dan. By the way, all the stuff that we normally do is now going to come back to bite both of us, because normally I give Dan a hard time about the sponsors and he gives me a hard time about the intro, and now we get to swap roles, which is just great.
That's right.
Also, for more than 40 years, PestSure has been protecting pest control companies with specialized insurance and safety programs, because no one understands the pest control industry better. Learn more at pestsure.com. And then finally, Voice for Pests is the only phone solution designed specifically for pest and lawn professionals. From powerful AI features to deep integrations to most CRMs, you can learn more over at voiceforpest.com/podcast. Again, we love it when you use the podcast link, because it gives bean counters, a reason to keep sponsoring the podcast. And finally, if you are interested, we do have our PMP Industry Insiders peer group. Dan and I were visiting with their group last week. It was fantastic. Maybe we'll talk more about that later. But as of right now, our peer groups are facilitated by industry veteran David Billingsley. You can visit pmpindustryinsider.com/peer groups, or go back and listen to episode 238, where Caleb Cunningham talks about how a peer group has influenced his company. And with that, we're going to get started. Today's guest is, okay.
It's not in print. So our special guest, Laura Corbin, her mom is Sherry Spencer Bachman, who will also be facilitating groups that we're putting together as well. And we spent some time with her last week as well. And with that, let's get started.
All right. I have to tell one story. And Laura, I'm not going to burn your time on this, but this one's fantastic. So we were with our peer group last week, and we were at Dan's house, and Dan was barbecuing some steaks, which was fantastic. He had surf and turf, by the way. So only the best. You heard it here on the podcast. If you join one of the peer groups, Dan's going to cook you steak and lobster. No, not lobster. It was salmon.
Salmon. Yeah.
Salmon. But I will tell you this. The best part, your dog's name is Oshi, is that right?
Oshi, yes.
So I'm talking to Dan. And if you think Dan can't run like a 6-minute mile, I promise you that he can, because Oshi popped up on the table and took an entire fillet and took off. And Dan was all elbows trying to catch that dog, which was
So
hilarious.
you
It
got to
was the
remember,
best part of the whole trip.
Oshi's this tiny little dog, and the steak was as big as he was.
It was.
Grabbed it right off the table
And
and
ran.
he wouldn't let go.
And Dan ran right after him. With that, remember, with that, our guest today is Laura Corbin. Laura is former president of Spencer Pest Services and former COO of Rocky's Termite and Pest in Florida. Today, she works as team development coach for the Pest Control Business Coach with our friend and her mom, Sherry Spencer Bachman. Laura joined us back on episode 44, Grow Faster with More Profit Through Office Automation. And today she is here to discuss growth without grind, building cells and systems that don't burn you out. And with that, Laura, welcome to our show. We are grateful that you're here. Oh.
Holy mackerel.
I am excited to be. I don't know how I follow Oshi with the steak, but I'm going to try my best over here.
Ask your mom. That was pretty funny.
I'm going to have to.
Listen, that night I laid down to go to bed and I started laughing. Like I replayed that whole scene in my brain and I started laughing again. So anyway. Well, Laura, we are grateful that you're here, grateful to talk a little bit about this topic is fantastic, right? I mean, everyone is out trying to build sales systems and they're also trying to grow their businesses, of course. But before we do that, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey, who you are? I mean, I know most of our listeners probably know who you are. From what I understand, you are quite the rock star on social media. But explain a little bit about who you are, how you got to where you're at, and then kind of what you're doing here in your role. And then we're going to roll over to our growth without grind.
Cool. Yeah, sounds good. Thank you for the intro. So I'm Laura Corbin. I am third generation in the pest control industry. I say I've technically been on payroll for over 15 years, but really I have grown up in the business. And if you're anything like me, where you're generational, you've done everything from putting stamps on envelopes to filing with the alphabet and coming in, I helped computerize the books. So I've done a little bit of
Wait a minute. That's what your mom said she did. So
apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right?
Yeah. So she computerized it and you recomputerized it.
I did. Yeah. When we moved over to Service Pro back in the day for our CRM. Yes. I got paid to input every customer from our dot matrix printouts. That was great.
Nice.
So,
wow. Yeah.
Yes. So that was way back in the late 1900s, as my kids like to say.
Yeah. The 1900s.
Yes. So anyway, I came on board back in 2010, and I've done just about every position in the company, from CSR to inside sales, outside sales, commercial sales, office manager, branch manager, general manager, I've regional manager, you name it, I've pretty much done it, except for service technician. But I wrote the training manuals and the SOPs. So if you asked me to go out and do service, I could. I just don't prefer to because I am petrified of bugs and critters. So great industry to be in, right?
Yeah. That's perfect.
You just want to kill them. I love it.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. No, I don't want to kill them. I want to run the business that kills them. How about that?
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
That's right.
Exactly right.
Like it. Exactly right.
Okay.
Well, listen,
go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm looking here at this very first question, and I love it. It's, for me personally, I've said this for years, and so this is a great setup, which is, oftentimes when you think about growing a business, a lot of folks don't put a lot of emphasis on systems and scaling. And so what happens is that they grow, they outgrow their systems, everyone's going crazy. And usually that's when big mistakes happen. The ideal way, I think, is you build the systems and then the business grows into that. Now, that's obviously ideal. I've certainly had several times in my career where I did it the wrong way and I've done it the right way. But I want to come back to you, like from your perspective, what usually breaks first when the sales start climbing, but the systems don't keep up?
Honestly, I don't think it's the sales team by any means that starts the first thing that breaks. To me, it's the onboarding and training processes. It's your hiring processes. It's how are you finding your people? How are you interviewing them? How are you onboarding them after the interview, pre-hire? And then how are you training them once they come, in the business and start their first day? If you don't have a good onboarding and training system, you're setting people up for failure, basically.
Hmm.
And so to me, it definitely starts with that. And it leads to all kinds of things within the system that breaks down. You know, your service quality slips, your communication slips, your people aren't pricing things correctly. They're not handling the customers properly. So, you know, if you don't start with the basics and you don't start with even before day one and set up a good system to bring them on board, it's not going to work.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, and it's time for a confession hour. And this is actually a question for both of you.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
For both of you. Now, have you ever hired someone and you were growing so fast that when you hired them, you knew that you were going to fire them?
Yeah.
Like you were so desperate.
Yes.
Like,
I mean, I'll be the first to admit it. I mean, hiring out of absolute desperation just to get a
yes.
warm body with a
See, you
pulse.
mean
Like,
when you have 10 positions open and only six people show up?
oh my
Yeah.
gosh,
That's
yes.
the
Yeah.
other one, which I thought was pretty cool. This is in the late 80s, was okay, you're going to train that guy because I hired you yesterday and this guy came in
That's right.
today.
Oh my gosh. I remember stepping in when I first stepped into the office. It was, here's your computer. Okay, well, what about like email or like where do I log in? Oh yeah, I guess I should set that up for you, huh? It's like, you know,
Mm,
and this was as a
yeah.
CSR position, but I remember even
Right.
walking into an office with technicians and it's their first day and it's like, oh, I forgot you were starting today. I guess you could go ride with this guy. Good luck.
Right. Yeah.
So little story. Laura worked with her mom at Spencer, and we actually sold Spencer for
Hmm.
them or with them. And one of the really cool things was, and this was before it was cool, before everybody was doing it. You walked into the office and there are TVs everywhere with all the stats rolling, right? So that
Mhm.
everybody knows all you gamify everything.
Hmm.
And so that I thought was pretty cool that everybody knew where they stood, and a lot of people are doing that now, but that was pretty revolutionary. It's probably the first time I ever saw it was in your office. So,
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was something that, I mean, Mom, Sherry, she's big on transparency. And I think transparency is key, especially when you want to win. And who in business doesn't want to win, right? You have to know where you're going. You have to know how you're going to get there. And you have to know how to measure the success along the way. And it's not about just the people at the top, it's about the team as a whole. And so we put that in place to create that like ultimate transparency. And it was cool to see people kind of hang around the TV and watch and be like, oh, yeah. And, you know, the numbers would be updating real time every day. And
Mhm.
so that was pretty fun to watch.
You know, Laura, you bring up a really good point, though, and I want to come back and circle back to it because I want
Yeah.
to kind of highlight it for our listeners, which is you hit on, I think, probably the most important part, which is no matter what, you always have to have a very strong recruiting and a very strong training system because that
Mhm.
is, I cannot agree more. It's a, when you're growing super fast, usually that's the first thing it breaks down, right? Folks
Yeah.
start like, oh, we got to get them out in the field now. Everyone's like working 12 hours, sometimes 14, sometimes 15. And it's very easy to say, well, later, or we don't have time to do that right now. And I've seen this happen so many times. It creates so many more problems. You'd be better off slowing down growth, I feel
Right.
like, versus trying to plow through it because you end up losing a ton of customers anyway. But so I want to come back to your point. Who have you seen or how have you seen someone who's very good about managing this issue? Because I think it's the critical issue, which is having a very good training system and having a very good onboarding system. Is there anyone know or software that someone's using or like how are folks that you've seen doing this well doing it?
Well, of course, we've got several clients who are doing it very well as we kind of coach them through the process. But one of my clients, he's using a program called Trainual. And so he has put all of his training into an automated training system where everything is very spelled out and it reinforces what they're learning in the field as well. And it, like Dan kind of mentioned, gamified it. It kind of gamified it a little bit. And it's able to kind of score the education and the knowledge that they're gaining while out in the field to make sure that they're actually retaining it. We've got another client that's using an AI program where she has literally put her entire employee handbook, SOPs, every training process into this AI program. And it has created an entire training program where you can literally have self-guided training from start to finish in any position within the company. So that was really cool too. And I love how she made it personal by incorporating her employee handbook and her company SOPs that were very specific to their culture and how they do things and how they manage their team. So we've got a couple of them that are doing it really well. We're also using some outside resources. I mean, I've always been a big fan of like you can't be a jack of all trades. Like you can't be an expert at everything. And so you need to be able to recognize what are you good at and what do you kind of suck at, and then find the people who can help you with that too, whether it's through coaching or even an outside resource like a recruiter or something where they can kind of help you along that process and use some of their experience. So that, when you're in it, you kind of get these blinders on. And you mentioned like desperation, like you're just kind of hiring someone because you need a warm body. And so when you use an outside source like a recruiter or something, it helps take those blinders off and they see them for who they are versus you seeing it for the desperate need that you have, right? So, all that to kind of say, use some outside sources to help you build some of these onboarding and training systems that make it super easy to implement and also very easy to repeat and make it a very repeatable process.
Right.
So was the AI program, was it just ChatGPT or Gemini,
No.
or is it was something specific to what
Yeah.
program was it?
It's called Cody AI. Pretty
Hmm.
cool. It was the first time
Yeah.
I've ever
C-O
seen it.
CODY?
Yeah,
Yep. Yep.
CODY AI.
You got it pulled up then?
Yeah, I already looked at it.
Okay.
Donnie's already down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, talk about AI and Donnie's all in. Office admin teams often become bottlenecked as companies scale. What does a well-systematized office look like in a pest or lawn company that's built for growth?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, in my opinion, that's one of the hardest things to scale because it's how do you organize it? So to me, a
Mhm.
well-systematized office doesn't feel chaotic. It feels predictable. You have to build that company for growth. And in order to do that, the office can't react to everything. They have to run on structure and they have to run on systems. So to me, a growth ready office looks like this. Every task has an owner and a checklist. Not, oh, can you do this? Can you do that? And whoever has time, you're actually assigning those tasks to individuals, sometimes real time, and then sometimes it's a prepared system, right? People need to know what's expected of them when they walk into work and know what they need to get done
Each and every day, here's the
every day.
checklist. This is what you do every day.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and how do you monitor that? How do you make sure, like if it's on paper, you check it off, right? Nobody uses
Yeah.
paper anymore. So how's it done?
For me, going back to utilizing systems and third party, tools that can help make it easier. Most people in the office, Sherry talks a lot about Colby, right? So most people in the
Mhm.
office are high fact finder, high follow throughs. They love information and they love a checklist. So create a checklist for them. Even better if it's a repeatable checklist that they can implement every day. So when they clock in for the day, that checklist auto populates again and they just start at the top and work their way down. And then they can actually check off individual tasks as they get them done, which if you're a fact finder follow through, that like brings you joy, right? Like you get excited to be able to put that little check mark there. And then at the end of the day, you were successful. You accomplished something as long as your checklist was complete.
So we talked about Office, we talked about bottlenecks, we talked about Colby, which we were going to talk about later, but you
Yeah.
bring that right in. But let's talk about sales teams and leadership. They often talk past each other. Sales blames it on operations, operations blames it on sales. And
Yep.
what are the most common communication gaps that you see, and how do you help the teams close them?
To me, the biggest communication gaps are unclear expectations and there's no consistent accountability in place. Sales thinks they're doing great because they're busy, and leadership thinks they're underperforming because the numbers aren't matching the activity. And then both sides get frustrated, right? And then neither one's hearing the other, and they kind of just start working against each other instead of working with each other. So, to me, the biggest and most important things are you've got to define what does success look like. the best way to do that is through KPIs, in my opinion. Measuring the numbers, and you inspect what you expect. If you don't know what you expect, how are you going to inspect it and make sure that they're doing a great job? So you've got to create very clear expectations and KPIs that, by the way, needs to be extremely transparent. You talked about our TVs in the office with these rolling numbers. That's why we had it. We wanted to make sure everybody knew what they were being measured up against and what they were being held to as far as the expectation goes. And then also keeping that communication open. We always had a weekly sales meeting where we celebrated that information, good or bad. It didn't matter. We talked about it, we celebrated it, and then we helped coach each other on how we can improve those things. So the more effective communication you can have, the more open, creating very clear and consistent expectations, and then just putting metrics in place, it's going to help so much in bridging the gap within that communication.
So how do you look at like sales? That is a very binary. You either made it or you didn't, right? So like some of the other things there, we can argue over whether it's right or wrong. But with sales, how is it that people can, or maybe leadership doesn't, sales thinks they're doing well and leadership says no. But look, you've got a forecast or a budget that you got to do. You hit it, we're happy. You don't hit it, we're not happy. It's pretty black and white. So tell me about, how that works. And also tell me about, you guys have a sales course that I think you work with Sandler, which is a big sales organization. How's that going?
Yeah, so it actually starts January 30th, so in a couple days. But
Okay.
to
Anybody
me,
who's interested will,
anybody,
what's your website?
pestcontrolbusinesscoach.com.
Okay.
Real
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah. So,
But yeah, we'd love to have people join. So to me, sales, yeah, you have your total sales number, which usually is calculated based on the revenue growth goals and blah, 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 right? Super important, don't get me wrong, but that's not the only metric that you need to measure your sales team against. What are they doing in order to hit those numbers? We call that behaviors, right? So when you do go through, Sandler talks about it a lot. They talk about behaviors, attitude, and technique. And those are things that we try to coach our clients on all the time and our teams on, is like, what behaviors are you doing every single day in order to make sure that you're getting the sales that you're being held accountable to, right? Like that annualized sales number. And then what kind of attitude do you have, right? If you're having a bad day, you're not going to sell anything. Everybody's going to feel that. But if you're having a good day, and by the way, you can fake the attitude sometimes too. So it's learning kind of what those triggers are and how to overcome them and how to make sure that your attitude is on point and you're constantly going and getting the next opportunity. And then it's the technique. So are you following a system, or like when that phone rings, are you just hoping for the best and taking an order? Or are you actually going to follow a system, take them down the road, drive the conversation in order to get the outcome that you want, which in sales ultimately is the sale and then some, hopefully. So to me, it's not just about revenue. Revenue is extremely important, don't get me wrong. But if you're just looking at this big revenue goal of, oh my gosh, I got to sell, $50,000 this month, that can be overwhelming. When you break that down into daily behaviors of, I got to make this many phone calls, I got to run this many appointments, I need to go to this many networking groups this month. And whatever that behavior is, it could be a little bit of anything. As long as you're focusing on that, it makes that revenue number so much easier to kind of comprehend, attain, and ultimately crush.
Well, for me, like revenue is a lagging indicator. It's all about managing the leading indicators. Like how many conversations we have, how many leads are we getting? Like that's where you really, really is on behaviors. And I love what you said, Laura, about the daily behaviors. Like if you nail that, the lagging indicators take care of themselves. And, a lot of times folks go, we focus on revenue. It's like, well, that's true, but it's like trying to drive a car looking at the rearview mirror, right? It just doesn't work. So, all right. Well, I'm glad to be back. It sounds like my internet's better now, which is great.
Yeah, that's good. You reset?
I'm all reset, so which is good.
Right.
Which is good. So, did you guys talk about leadership in sales teams and just how they communicate? Did you guys get to that part? Because I know I had to jump out real quick, and if not, I do want to talk about it. Like I want to hear.
Go ahead, ask your questions, even though we're going backwards. And Brett, you got a total mess here.
You got a big old mess. You got to get. So I guess my question is, when we talk about these gaps between leadership and sales teams, and it's we were talking about this whole idea of managing the lead indicators. It's really, I'm curious to hear, how do you help sales teams bridge the gap so that they can speak and same thing. I mean, I think most leadership teams understand, hey, we need to be talking about what's happening with the lead indicators, but that usually is not the issue that I see. Usually the issue I see is that sales teams are compensated based upon what they produce, but that may not always be in line with what the business needs. There's times that we need to go fast, there's times that we need to go slow, especially in the realm of sales. How do they close that gap, and how do you get them aligned to the same? And to me, that's always been a challenge, right? Is managing the throttle is what we call it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
any thoughts there?
You know, I talked a little bit about this before, but transparency and talking to each other and just having real conversations. I love the EOS system personally. And so if you know anything about EOS, they talk about their L10 meetings. And to me, L10 meetings is probably the biggest benefit from EOS in general. And so I had an L10 meeting with my sales team every week. And I had all my leadership in there, my service managers, my ops manager. We didn't have a sales manager, but then I also had my office managers in there as well. And it was a great opportunity for us to be in the same room and talk about real stuff without getting offended by it. Because I agree, like
Mhm.
salespeople, they just want to get their sales and get their commissions and kind of move
Mhm.
on to the next opportunity. And with that, sometimes can create admin problems or service problems and that kind of thing. Because like you said, they're all gas and no brakes. And so
Mhm.
by having those open meetings and really giving each other permission to give honest feedback, not take offense to it, and work through some, identify what the issue is, discuss it truly at a very honest, organic level, and then solve it together as a team. Where when we left that meeting, it was like we're all in agreement with this is how things are going to go moving forward. That was a game changer for my team, and it brought everybody together. It always seems like service and sales kind of sit very separate, and they shouldn't. They need to work very close with each other in order to have a great operation as a whole. And the admin crew needs to be thrown in there as well because they're the ones talking to the customers, they're scheduling, handling the billing, like doing all that kind of stuff, the relationship
Yeah.
management basically, right? So by involving everybody, it kind of helped bring everybody together as a team and really start working forward together in the same trajectory.
Well,
Okay, so
I'll just
so
before you catch in there, Dan, there's one thing she said that I just want to highlight for the listeners because it's a critical part of what she just said, which is this whole idea of one of the biggest things that we struggle with when we promote a manager is they think good management is I've got to support my team, but that definition of their team is wrong. They
Yeah.
think their team are the folks that report to them, and I'm like, nope, your team is around this table. Like, you know what I mean? And so this whole idea, like, for example, if you have service delivery issues, your team is going to focus that, right? They're going to focus on that and solve it as a team versus it's like, well, my sales team can't get this because you are doing this. And they all tend, and this whole idea of that breaking that mindset of, people who report to me as my team is a hard one, but it is absolutely necessary to get everyone in line, especially on the manager team. So, all right, Dan, you were going to say
all
something
right.
because that's a key part of what she said.
So this is a problem. How do you handle it? Actually, a client said it to me the other day. So sales guys on a tear, salespeople are on a tear. Operations are up to their ears. They can't handle anymore. They're saying, stop selling. You can't tell a salesperson to stop selling. What do you do?
I mean, that's a great question. So if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So you got yourself in this mess for a reason, right? You didn't look ahead. You weren't proactive. You didn't put a plan in place in order to handle the scalability, in my opinion. But at this point, it's too late. So now how do we fix it, right? Again, it goes back to getting the leaders in the room and getting everybody on board with what this solution looks like. It's not a one person solves it. And by the way, that always seems to be like thrown on the owner or the CEO, right? Or like high level executives. But the problem is nothing against them because they're obviously extremely important in the organization. They are not or should not be in the day to day business. And so they can
Mhm.
tell you their opinions, which is great because they're going to have some kind of like outsider view of what maybe they think should go on. But you need the opinions of people who are in the business, dealing with the day to day and saying, okay, here's what I see happening. Here's what's going wrong. Here's what's going to continue to escalate if we don't do something about it. And here's what I think should be done in order to fix it. And let's all problem solve together as a team and be like one cohesive, well-oiled machine and a group that works together rather than like, oh, well, that's a service problem. Let's let service deal with it, you know?
Okay, so what do you tell the sales guy? I'm going to lose my commission if you can't get it serviced.
Well, I know for me,
Yeah.
like we have this issue as well. And to Laura's point, sometimes you can control it, sometimes you can't, right? I mean,
Mhm.
sometimes
Yeah.
something happens. Like think about like in the case of lawn care where you have army worms or some opportunity comes up that you were not prepared for or didn't know. And in those cases, you just have to be like, hey, listen, we're going to find a way for you to win. Maybe there's a way that we can start pushing jobs out or, this idea that you're right, Dan, you can't tell people to stop selling, but you can tell them to throttle a little bit because the reality of it is that if they can't service it, ultimately you have to have the long-term vision that you are going to hurt yourself. You're getting a short-term gain for a long-term loss, and you have to
Mhm.
be able to communicate that and package it in a way that the sales team can understand. Because ultimately, if they're on a tear and they're doing great, but we don't deliver the promise, well, then what's their year going to look like next year? What's their year going to look like? I mean, what's next month going to look like? And so it's just there's this whole idea of obviously plan as best as you can, but you got to be able to deal with problems thinking in the long term. So,
Mhm.
um,
One
all
thing I
right.
used to tell my salespeople is sell it and I'll figure it out. Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. I promise.
That's dangerous,
Literally. And
man.
I know
That
it's
is
dangerous.
dangerous.
Uh-huh.
From a residential standpoint, I think it's a
Yeah.
lot easier to figure out than from a commercial standpoint, in my
100%.
opinion. I could be
Hmm.
wrong, but and most of my experience was really in residential. I mean, I've done commercial as well, but I've never worked for a very commercial heavy company. And
Hmm.
so residentially, it's like, yeah, we are going to figure it out. I mean, I even had service managers, ops managers in the field doing service in order to like catch up because part of the reason why we were behind is they weren't paying attention to their metrics either. They weren't hiring on time. They weren't training on time and following a training calendar, that kind of thing. So it's like, look, now it's time for you to jump out there. It's all hands on deck. Let's get it done. Let's work together. So,
Hmm.
like I said, as far as a salesperson goes, you don't want to demotivate them and tell them, hey, pump the brakes. But it's like, you sell it, we'll figure out how to get it done from there. And like Donnie said, if that meant putting it out a little bit, then yeah, absolutely. You do what you have to do. But the last thing you want to do is demotivate your salesperson.
That's right.
Hmm. For sure, for sure. So let's bring this back around. If an owner is feeling burned out, they're out there, they're selling things, are growing. They don't have their systems in place, or their systems are not supporting the growth that they've got going on. What would you say is the one system or process that they could start on that would immediately reduce stress and still support growth? What do you think is the one thing if they could focus on this first? Like, what's the first step to kind of get them out of the chaos?
To me, it's a leadership meeting pulse. That's my personal opinion. You got to have a strong leadership team in place. In order to do that, you have to train them. In order to do that, you need to consistently get together and meet with each other and go over the good, the bad, the ugly, right? And so putting in place some sort of leadership meeting pulse. And by the way, if your company is smaller and you don't have a leadership team, get an outside source that can help support you. Talk to some of the industry experts, like the two of you, like our company, where we can help support you and be that stand-in leadership team as you're growing and scaling and work through some of these issues. And you need to have a very strong agenda. You need to have a very open room and open conversation where you're not afraid to hurt people's feelings. You're not afraid to bring up the uncomfortable topics. You're not afraid to talk about, like I said, the good, the bad, the ugly. And let's hash it out. Let's work it out together. And then let's all work together moving forward in implementing some of these systems that we discuss in place. So, for example, we talked a lot about hiring and onboarding, and that's kind of like where it starts. Go into a leadership meeting and say, hey, we have no onboarding process, or our hiring process sucks, or our training process is throw somebody in a truck and hope for the best. That's not going to work. We have big goals, right? And so you start having the tough conversations and you get everybody invested, everybody who is of leadership or of an important role within the company, and get them involved in it, because the more you get your people involved, the more buy-in you're going to have, the more likely you are to get this stuff actually implemented. So again, I think it starts with your leadership. It starts with a consistent meeting with a consistent, strong agenda in order to actually get action items in place to start getting those systems documented and implemented.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think the other part to add to that, if I can, is a commitment on the owner's part. Oftentimes what I see is someone's in a place that sucks and they're like, yeah, we're going to get organized. And they start putting effort behind it. They start putting resources and things start changing. And then the chaos goes away just enough that they're like, well, we're good.
Right. And then they stop doing it.
They stop doing it. And then the next thing you know, like a month or two later, it's back on again. And, it's this whole commitment of like, okay, we are actually going to take the time to do this. Because listen, there's not many owners, myself included, who enjoy building systems and processes. And I enjoy watching them work, right? But I don't get my jollies by sitting down and writing an ops book, ops manual. I really don't. But I understand the value of them, and I'm willing to do the work if that's what it takes, And so the other part I would say is, as an owner, you got to be fully committed to this and understand and know that this is the infrastructure. This is how companies break glass barriers. This is how companies go to the next level, is doing the work that most people won't do. And that's just a hard conversation that you need to have with yourself and be willing to do it. So cool.
One other thing. So Laura does get her jollies from doing all of those processes, and she's got a whole deal, and you should go visit her at pestcontrolbusinesscoach.com. Don't you have like an ops manual or SOPs?
We've got. Yeah, we've got all kinds of online resources for purchase that you can customize, but you can also work with me, and I can work individually with your team and interview them and come up with your own for you, so you don't have to do it yourself. Like Donnie said, a lot of these owners don't want to do it themselves. Don't use a resource, and I'm happy to be that resource for you.
Yeah, deal. Love it. All righty. Well, listen, Laura, really appreciate you coming out on the podcast. It's been fantastic. And my apologies for some of the technical difficulty. And if you're listening to this and like, Donnie didn't have any technical difficulties, that means our editors were amazing. Because we actually did it.
But that's the way it's going to come out,
That's the way it's going to come out. So, Laura, really appreciate you having on board here. Just a reminder, all the resources and topics we talked about today are going to be available on the podcast website. We'll link up Laura's website as well. You just go over to pmpindustryinsider.com, take a look under show notes. And as always, we appreciate any ratings and reviews you can give us. And we ask that all complaints in general, just negativity, head towards Dan. He loves it. And with that, we're signing off. We'll see you next time. Take care.
See ya.
Thank you.